While in Cataclysm, Demonology takes over the top spot from Affliction, and Affliction is knocked down a peg from its status in Wrath of the Lich King as the best progression caster spec for the entire game up until very late ICC, where it's taken over by the Fire Mage. It is still a decently viable spec in Cataclysm, and it has its strengths. It's really fun to play, it has a decently high skill cap, and it's really good at like 2 to 3 target sustained cleave with its multi-dotting. For selecting the Affliction specialization, you get access to UA at level 10, which is kind of nice. Although Affliction is no longer the #1 leveling spec, at least 1 to 60, I think Destruction is a little bit better there. You get 30% shadow spell damage, and you get your Mastery, which just scales all of your periodic damage, which is basically everything but your Shadow Bolt. For first tier, we're going to get Doom and Gloom, and we're going to get Improved Corruption. These are just damage on your dots. We're going to grab Soul Siphon. This increases your Drain Soul by a percentage based on the number of effects you have. This is like basically the same as it works in Wrath. We're going to grab Jinx. This is like a nice 1-point utility that gives your COE and AoE. So if you have to keep up Curse of Elements like in a 10-man or something, this is really nice. We're going to grab Life Tap. Here we're going to grab Eradication. This is the same as in Wrath. It's just a haste proc off your Corruption. We're going to grab Siphon Life. This is like nice self-healing from your Corruption, although it is a bit nerfed from Wrath, where instead of like a percentage of the damage done healing you, it's just a chance to proc 2%, but still like nice passive self-healing. Here we're going to grab Soul Swap. This is like one of the biggest main changes to the spec, and it's a pretty cool ability. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later when I discuss rotations. We're going to grab Shadow Embrace. This is the same as Wrath again, just stacks up a periodic damage buff from your filler and your haunt. Here we have like a little bit of a flex point. We can go 2 out of 2 in Jinx. We can grab Curse of Exhaustion if you have to slow something. Yeah, that's basically the choice here. These other 2 talents are not really useful for raiding environment. This tier, we just get all 3. Soulburn, Seed of Corruption. What this does is your Soulburn, which is a new ability that interacts with your shards, that again I'll talk about later in the rotation section, makes your Seed Detonation apply Corruption to everything it hits, so this is like really strong for big mass AoE. Nightfall, this is just a chance to proc instant Shadow Bolts. Death's Embrace, this is Execute, so below 25% health, your damage is just increased by 12%, which is nice. This is changed from Wrath, where it's 35. Everlasting Affliction, this is crit on our dots, and all dots can crit now. And it also gives Drain Soul and Haunt 100% chance to reset the duration of your Corruption on the target. So what you'll notice here that's a big difference from Wrath is that Shadow Bolt no longer resets Corruption. So that's like kind of a big change. You're going to have a harder time resetting Corruption on a bunch of targets, but you can now use Seed to put it up on a bunch of targets, and you can also use Soul Swap to make your multi-dotting a bit easier, which I'll talk about later again. Pandemic, this reduces the GCD of your Bane and Curse spells by 0.5, and it gives your Drain Soul a chance to refresh UA on the target, so your Execute gets a little bit simpler here. You don't have to worry about canceling your Drain Souls to reapply UA. Then we get Haunt. This is same as it is in Wrath, it's just a little nuke that applies 20% shadow damage to the target. And it does heal you for 100%, same as it does in Wrath. Next, we're going to get Dark Arts. This just increases the damage of our Fell Hunter. Our Fell Hunter does like a significant amount of damage now with its Shadow Bite. Shadow Bite is very strong. And then we're going to grab 3 Bane and 3 Shadow and Flame. This is just cast time on our filler, and then our 5% crit debuff on the boss, and another percentage buff to our filler. So this is like the tree. There's really no like flexibility here. You can drop a point in Jinx and get like 1 Fell synergy if your pet's dying, but your pet shouldn't be dying. And again, you can get COE if you need to slow something. So yeah, that's the basic spec. Let's talk about Glyphs. For Glyphs, your prime Glyphs are like your big throughput Glyphs. These are going to be similar to Wrath. You're going to grab Haunt, which is just 3% additional from your Haunt, which is really nice. It's basically just 3% increased damage. You're going to grab UA, which is just a cast time reduction of your UA. And then you're going to grab Corruption, which is, again, it doubles your Nightfall proc chance. On fights where you're going to have, like, sustained 2 to 3 target cleave, you can grab Bane of Agony over Corruption, although this remains to, like, be simmed whether or not this is actually worth it. For single target and multi-dotting, this is going to be a decent glyph setup, although you can easily swap your glyphs now with Dust of Disappearance, so Just keep an eye out for situations where you're actually going to have Bane of Agony up on a target. Your major glyphs, these are like your utility, like swappable glyphs. Life tap, you're pretty much always going to take. This is just less GCD on your life tap, which over the course of a fight, if you life tap 6 times, this is 2 full globals you save or whatever, which is, you know, a decent damage increase. The next couple are actually decently swappable. Soulstone is going to increase the health that somebody brezzes with your Soulstone, which is now a battle res, so this is like nice for prog. Soul Link is just 5% DR. Every spec gets Soul Link now, so every spec is like tanky, it's not just demo. Shadow Flame is good in like 5-mans. If you have to, you know, allows you to kite things around. It's like a really big slow. Shadow Bolt is like a decent single target DPS increase, just because like makes 1 out of every 7 Shadow Bolts free mana cost, which is less life taps. And actually the most important one is Soul Swap. So the Glyph of Soul Swap makes your Soul Swap, which is an ability that stores the dots from a target and lets you spit them out onto another target in a window of 20 seconds. And we'll talk about this a little bit later again in rotations, but this makes it leave dots behind but has a 30-second CD. So usually going to be grabbing this, although on fights where you're never going to use Soul Swap, you can swap out one of these other glyphs for just a little bit of a damage increase or a utility bonus. But yeah, I would just always grab life tap. Think about if you're going to use Soul Swap, and then, you know, like Soulstone for prog, or yeah, that's basically it. Minor glyphs, it doesn't really matter. You don't need your Drain Soul to generate shards anymore, so everything's just kind of useless. You can just grab whatever you want to for like RP or whatever. You can get your Eye of Kilrog to fly around. So that's glyphs. Let's talk about the new abilities you get going from 81 to 83. 81, you get Fell Flame. Fell Flame is an instant cast, does a little bit of damage, and it also increases the duration of your like spec-specific castable dot. So either Immolate for Destro or Demo, or UA for Affliction. So the main use of this is just for movement. If you're running around and you can't cast, you can just use your Fell Flame. Whereas, you know, before all you could really do was life tap or Shadow Flame if you were in range of the boss. Now you have a third thing to do. So your damage, your mobility just goes up a little bit there, which is nice because we're decently immobile. The next thing we get is DI, so this is going to mess up parsing and it might cause some drama in your guild or whatever, but this is basically just focus magic but for haste. So you link yourself with a target, you both get 3% haste, and then whenever the linked person gets a crit on a dot or a hot, you get 3% and they get 1%, stacking periodic damage and healing buff, and that goes to 3. So you get 9% and they get 3%. I think for damage dealers, like the BIS in terms of total DPS is probably Shadow Priest and then maybe Fire Mage. And then for healers, it's just Resto Druid all the way, right? Because they have so many hots. Although you're rarely going to put this on a healer. The ideal would be like another Affliction Warlock, right? But they already have it themselves, so they don't need it from you. The last thing we get is Demon Soul. This is like a nice 2-minute CD, and it just gives 20% periodic shadow damage for 20 seconds. So you're going to be using this like on the rip during Bloodlust, and then basically on CD, unless there's of course like intermissions or whatever. A little bit of a burst window now, which is good. There's a lot of fights in Cata where burst matters. So those are our new abilities. Again, not anything too terribly important. You get a little bit of a CD, a little bit of a marginal ability to use on movement, and then you have your like focus magic. So let's talk about rotation now. The spec really does not change that much from Wrath, which I think is a good thing. I think Affliction is like super fun. Its Wrath sign is pretty good and doesn't really need to be changed too much. So what you're going to be doing is, you know, you're a dot class, so your number one priority is keeping up your dots. The difference here is that on single target, instead of Agony, you're going to be using your Bane of Doom, which now your Agony and your Doom no longer take up curse slots, so you can have your Doom up and also your Curse of Elements. And as you can see here, this Jinx is like giving it a little bit of an AoE, which is really nice. So you're going to want to keep your dots 100% uptime. Your Bane of Doom ticks every 15 seconds now too, which is a little bit of a nice thing there. You don't have to like worry about kill times as much when putting this up. So yeah, you keep your dots up. You're going to be haunting to put up the debuff, and then you're going to be, if you have range to Shadow Flame is a damage increase over Shadow Bolt, and then you're going to be filler Shadow Bolting, resetting your UA, put your Doom back up when it drops, and refresh your Corruption with Haunt. So that's like just the sustained single target rotation. You're gonna have your Fel Hunter out pretty much always. It does a really good amount of damage with its bite. So yeah, that's the rotation. It's basically the same as Wrath, except you're using Doom instead of Agony. And your Shadow Bolt no longer refreshes Corruption, so you just have to be careful about not dropping that using your Haunt when you need to refresh that Corruption, especially like on multiple targets. Whereas in Wrath, if you had a bunch of haste, your Corruption's duration would get really low. Now you have like to always have like a decent amount of time to refresh it, which is really nice. So let's talk about the Execute rotation. So because of how Pandemic now works, your Drain Soul, like while you're in that Execute, will reset your UA. So your Execute actually gets like considerably easier in Cataclysm, where you no longer have to juggle UA, you don't have to be like looking at the kill time and only putting it up when it'll get its full duration. So your Execute is just going to be your number one priority, is like keeping that Corruption refreshed. You're going to have Doom ticking on the target, you're going to have your UA on the target, then you're going to keep up Haunt, and you're going to Drain Soul. And while this sounds simple, like you still have all those interactions in like in Wrath, where you're going to want to be like tracking all your procs, any on use like trinkets, you know, your NG gloves, your tailoring cloak, all that stuff, any kind of externals you get like PI or Bloodlust or anything like that, and you're going to want to be like trying to snapshot a big Drain Soul. So even though it sounds like simple, and it is a little bit simpler with the Drain Soul resetting your UA, it is like there's a deceptive amount of depth in really min-maxing how much damage you can do with Drain Soul. And you will occasionally have to keep up your like 5% crit debuff if you're the only one providing it by just chucking out a Shadow Bolt. Ideally you'll have like a Nightfall proc to get an instant one, although in like a 25-man other people will also be putting up that debuff, so you don't have to worry about it too much. For multi-target rotation, I'm just going to do a quick overview of like how Soul Swap actually works before we talk about this. So Soul Swap, its default has no cooldown, and it just deals a tiny bit of instant damage and removes all your dots. So like I'm going to put up Corruption, UA, and Doom. You can see them there. I'm going to press Soul Swap, and you can see they disappear from the target, although it leaves the curse behind, and I get this little buff that lasts for 20 seconds. So the next person I click, it's like the same keybind, it just swaps. So I have it on R here, so if I just press R again on a different target, I can't do it on the same target, it just says invalid. If I do it on another target, you'll see all those dots get put on that target, and they're all at full duration, which is a bit nice. It also does reset, like if you have your Agony ramps over time. If you use Soul Swap right at the end of the Agony, it will reset that timer. So that's how Soul Swap works without the glyph. And I'm going to put the glyph in and I'll show how it works. Alright, so glyph's in here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the same dots up. I'm going to press Soul Swap. Now you'll see that I got the same little Soul Swap thing. The dots stayed on the target. And now I can put them on a new target and they'll be full duration. So basically what this does is, and you'll see it has like a 30-second CD on it now. So what this does is, like, if you just are in 2-3 target cleave, it makes it take less globals to put your dots up on multiple targets. The only other thing to remember with this is that your Doom can only be put on one thing. So if you have 3 targets, you're going to want to be putting your Corruption, UA, and Doom on like the one target that maybe is going to live the longest, right? So your Doom has time to tick. Then on the second target, you're going to put your dots and your Agony up, and then you're going to Soul Swap off the second target onto the third, because it's going to put up your Bane of Agony. Whereas if you Soul Swapped up the first target, you will just be wasting like that Doom, because it's not going to apply, so you have to put Agony up manually. Well, now let's talk about Soul Burn too. So Soul Burn is an ability that you get that consumes your soul shards, which are now like a resource below your character thing. But they're basically like combo points or holy power, although you won't be like spending and generating them as much as you do in the retail. It's not really like builder spender. You just basically get 3 of these in a fight, and you can use your Soul Burn, which is a 4 to 5 second CD that just makes like the next ability you use have a different effect if it's one of the abilities in the list. So it makes your pets instant cast, it makes Soul Burn instant cast, or Soul Fire instant cast rather, and it makes with this talent, it makes your Seed of Corruption spread corruption to everything, and if it does pop this way, you get the Soul Shard back. So it doesn't cost a shard, it just costs a CD on this. So if I put this up, and then I pop the seed, you'll see that this has corruption, like the target you put the seed on has corruption, and then all the targets around it also get corruption. So on like 3-4 target cleave, instead of like tabbing between them and putting corruption up on everything, using a bunch of globals, again, because the only thing that can refresh corruption is Haunt and Drain Life, but you don't really want to be like spending globals Drain Lifing things, because Drain Life doesn't do very much damage. So like in Wrath, you'd be tabbing between them and refreshing corruption with Shadow Bolt. But now you can put corruption up on everything with that Soulburn seed when your Soulburn is off CD, and then otherwise you're going to be either manually putting it back up or spreading it with Soul Swap. So you're again, like, because of that Shadow Bolt change, not refreshing corruption, your multi-target gets a tiny bit more complicated, where you're gonna have to like keep track of your Soulburn CD and use your seed to put things up, and then otherwise like be tabbing around, soul swapping and corrupting. Against like big cleave, like on trash or like 5-man big pulls or whatever, like 5+ targets, you just seed. And ideally, like, your tank gathers things up, you'd be, if you're running in, you can chuck out a couple corruptions, like, as the tank gathers things and gets threat and stuff, and those will be ticking away, proccing Eradication, which is a bit nice. And then, like, once the pool's situated, and ads have threat on them, although threat's, like, less of an issue in Cataclysm, you're going to be soul burning, you're going to be seeding, and then you're just going to, like, tab seed, and that's your mass AoE. Basically the same as Wrath, except that soul burn now puts corruption and everything, so your mass cleave is like a bit stronger there. Although seed itself does get like a bit of a nerf. Also, you're gonna try to be in melee as much as possible so that you can Shadow Flame, but on trash and in 5-mans and stuff, like, sometimes you just can't be in melee, and if you can't be in melee, you're just gonna be spamming your seed. Alright, so that's like rotation and AoE. Let's talk about opener. For opener, what I would do is you can soul burn in the opener and then soul harvest the shard back like before combat to get a free use of this. So unless you're going to be using this to put up seed dots on multiple targets, like sometime in the beginning of the fight, you can use this to start the fight with a free soulfire. So you're going to be pre-potting and all that, you're going to be soul burning, you're going to harvest the shard back, and then you're going to like precast a Shadow Bolt to put up 5% crit. You're going to have that soul burn, and you're going to use it to do an instant soulfire. And then you're going to haunt to put up your like a stack of Shadow Embrace and also this 23% increased dot damage debuff. And then you're going to Demon Soul, and then you're going to put your dots up to get that Demon Soul 20% into those initial dots. Also, like, about the time you're going to be Demon Souling, you're going to have Lust up, right? Because usually you're going to be popping that in like the first 2 globals or something. So you're going to get your full duration of this cooldown inside of Lust, and also like get that damage into your first dots you put up. So again, that's Soul Burn, Harvest, that shard back, you're going to precast Shadow Bolt, you're going to pre-pot, you're going to Soulfire, and then you're going to Haunt, and then you're going to Demon Soul, pop your like on-use stuff, and then you're going to put your dots up. And then you're just going into the rotation. Also, if you can't start the fight like within Shadow Flame range, while you're the ideal like time to run into range for this is while you're like, you're gonna precast your Shadow Bolt, you're gonna Haunt, you're gonna UA, and then as you cast Corruption and Doom, you have 2 globals of time to run in. So you can Corruption, Doom, Shadow Flame into the rotation. Also, like, if you have engineering, that's a decent time to boots if you're not going to use them in the fight, right? You can just close the distance a little bit better. But ideally, you're going to be starting like decently close enough to the boss that you can just get into Shadow Flame range with those 2 globals of putting your dots up. Otherwise, you can Fell Flame once as you're running in. For movement, it's basically the same as Wrath with your portal. You can soul burn and portal and get a little bit of a sprint, but you're probably going to be wanting to save those shards for like either your pet dying in an absolute emergency, or like, getting instant soul fires out, or getting your like seed corruption stuff. That's something to just keep in mind for super marginal cases where you need that sprint. You have your Fell Flame now, so instead of like as a movement ability, you can Shadow Flame, life tap, and then once you don't have to life tap anymore, if you still have to move, you just cast your Fell Flame. And Fel Flame does increase the duration of UA, so you can spam it as much as you want. It'll just keep going back to 15 seconds. And this also does like reset like any kind of spell power snapshotting on the UA that you have. So you can't like extend one big UA forever. The only other thing to mention with the opener is your Doomguard. You get this ability isn't like the RP ability it is in previous expansions. It's actually like a useful CD now. It's shared with Infernal. So like on AoE you're gonna drop Infernal, and then on single target you're gonna summon your Doomguard, and it just hits whatever has your like Curse of Doom on it. And then it just casts like a little shadow bolts at it. This snapshot's intellect, so you're gonna want to use this in the opener. Like you're gonna be keeping track of like your tailoring proc, like any trinket procs, anything like that. And as soon as they're all up, you just cast that. All right, now that we've talked about rotations and opener, let's talk about racials. Sims are not out yet for like actual classic, and we don't know exactly whether or not like scripting and how abilities interact and stuff like that is going to be exactly the same as it is on beta or on private servers or on like OG Classic. So I take this stuff with a grain of salt until Sims come out, and those Sims are proven to be the same as like actual Classic when it releases. With that said, I think that Orc and Troll are going to be decently close. I think that Orc is probably better for like demo just because of the pet damage, and your pet does do a decent amount now, so that 5% is like going to be nice. Your 2-minute Blood Fury also lines up with your 2-minute Demon Soul, which is nice. But like on shorter fights, I think Troll might pull ahead just because like, you know, that haste is really nice. You can stack it up in that lust when you're just popping everything. And then you can delay it maybe for like your third Demon Soul if the fight's long. Also, if you have like a fight length that's like 3 minutes 30, Troll is going to be really good because you're going to get your first Zerk in Lust, and then you're going to get your last Zerk in Execute phase. And you can probably just delay your Demon Soul to line up with Execute. So again, they're probably going to be pretty close. I think Goblin's like fine too if you want to be a Goblin for like RP reasons or whatever. The 1% haste's decent at low gear levels, especially because it helps you get to your like soft caps. But I think that the on-use races are going to be better. For Alliance, it's just Worgen, right? The gnome racial doesn't really do anything for you. Although you can pretty safely just like go human for PvP because the Worgen 1% crit is like not that good anyways. Although the sprint's kind of nice. For stats, you're like int over everything because int spell power now. Hit cap to 17%. Every caster is 17% now because the hit debuff's gone, and also hit talents are pretty much universally removed. So that's simple. You don't have to like wonder, oh, what's my hit cap? Go to your talents, and it's just always 17% for everybody. So you're going to get your hit to cap. After that, you get haste. After haste, you get mastery, and after mastery, you get crit. Your haste is going to have like caps where you get extra ticks, but part of the usefulness of the internet is you can outsource tedious and annoying, difficult math-related things to autistic people. So I just outsource figuring out haste caps, and you can just Google that, and you'll find out your caps. Those are going to change based on like raid buffs and also whether or not you're Goblin. You can also just sim it too when the sims come out. For gems, you're just going to gem like your crit damage gem on your helm meta, which I think you pretty much use as long as it's in the game. You're going to go int in your red sockets. If the socket bonus is like 20 intellect or 30 secondary stat, you're going to grab int haste and you're going to grab int hit in blues. When in doubt, just sim it too. I think a lot of the socket bonuses in Cat are designed to be worth it, but yeah, again, just sim it if you're not sure. For enchants, your enchants are like super straightforward. You get intellect where you can, otherwise you get your stat priorities. It's not like super complicated. I think every caster is like pretty similar on those enchants. For consumables are like super straightforward in Cataclysm. You just get intellect, you get int food, you get int flask, and you just potion int. I think that's basically the same for every caster. I don't think there's anyone that like wants to haste food or mastery food or anything. For professions, I think tailoring is going to be best for like almost every DPS spec, just because it gives on average a really high amount of stat or attack bar for melee. And also it's a proc, so it like lines up on pull with everything, which is nice. For your second proc, I'd probably just go NG. In phase 1, your Abyss is going to be your Darkmoon card, which is a proc, and then your Bell, which is also a proc. So both of those trinkets don't compete with your NG gloves, and your NG gloves are really nice for like on pull. You can snapshot them into your Doomguard. You can just, you know, line it up with other things to get extra value. But beyond that, you can pretty much just get any like main crafting profession because they all give 80 int. Late game, you're going to want to go blacksmithing over the other ones just because you get 100 int from it instead of 80 if you want one of the passive stat bonus professions. So like late game, if you don't if you use an on-use trinket, or like if you get heart or something in phase 1 and you want to use it, you can swap to any other of the professions. And late game, when you have those epic gems, you're going to want to go blacksmithing over the other ones because it just gives 20 extra int. So that's professions, like pretty simple. I feel like engineering is just really nice though with the utility, because you get like, you get Jeeves, you get all the like quality of life stuff. You get rocket boots, which rocket boots, like if they fail, they just do a chunk of damage to you, but you can mitigate that with just like you pop your health stone, your healers heal you up. It's not like a huge deal. You have your soul link too, which is like a nice DR that's always up. You shouldn't be dying to that. It just, you can't really rely on the boots to like always 100% work like you can in Wrath, but they're still really good and you're still like a decently immobile spec, so it's really nice to have those. So I think NG is like just worth it. NG tailoring is the way I'm gonna go. Also, all the like gear stuff you get from professions outside of like NG Helm is pretty much BOE, so like all the other stuff you can just buy. So let's talk about gearing tips. Archaeology is going to give you a ring and a staff, which is decent, but again, if you don't want to like grind for hours and hours and hours for just a previous item that's not going to last through the raid, you don't have to do that. Darkmoon card is like going to be your #1 priority. Darkmoon card Volcano is insane, and it's really good for the whole of phase 1, and you can wear it into phase 2 without being like too embarrassed. That's like #1 priority, is buy that. If you don't have gold, get gold somehow and buy it. It's probably going to be pretty expensive like week 1 and 2. After that, get your Therzane Rep 2 exalted for the shoulder enchants. Just like a good use of time that's efficient, that's going to benefit you for the rest of the expansion. And then after that, if you're going hard, you can go get your reputations. There's a bunch of reputation guides out there. You can also just like look up the vendors and see what items you want and fill in the slots that you didn't get from like your heroic spam. But again, like it's all pre-raid stuff, you know, unless you're really going hard week 1, in which case you probably don't need these gearing tips. You don't have to really worry about it too much. Just run as many heroics as you can and you'll be fine. When it comes to weak auras, I would just recommend having your dots tracked, procs, and externals tracked. When in doubt, you can just grab like the Foji pack. He always makes good weak auras. You can make one yourself, doesn't really matter. The other thing is just to ensure that you have some kind of tool that helps you snapshot your drain soul. Either just doing it manually by tracking your procs and externals yourself, or having like a weak aura that tells you when you should and shouldn't do it. If you want to go super in-depth into like min-maxing drain soul, I'd recommend just checking out NLG's Wrath guide for drain soul. Yeah, that's Affliction. Hope you have fun in Cataclysm, and don't burn yourself out too hard doing archaeology and pre-patch, like I have with like 400 solves.